George Elmer Denborough, more commonly known as Georgie, the first character introduced in the book. He is the 6-year-old brother of Bill Denborough, and he goes out to sail his boat made from a sheet of newspaper only for it to be swept into a storm drain. Seconds later, Pennywise appears and tempts him with balloons and circus food. Georgie says no, and as Georgie reaches for the boat, Pennywise grabs him and rips his arm off, whispering to him, "They float," while he bleeds to death. Eddie Corcoran. Eddie Corcoran is a classmate of the Losers Club and Henry's gang. Like Beverly Marsh, Eddie and his younger brother Dorsey are victims of child abuse by their stepfather, Richard Macklin. Eddie's stepfather would often beat both boys brutally and without warning, at one point throwing Eddie into a coat rack with enough force to make him urinate blood for 2 weeks for accidentally slamming the door while Macklin was sleeping. In May 1957, Macklin hit Dorsey in the back of the head with a hammer, accidentally killing him, which he covered up to look like an accident. 2 days before summer vacation in June 1958, Eddie runs away from home and decides to rest in the park. However, using Dorsey's form, it approaches Eddie and chases after him before assuming the form of the Gill Man to kill him. Eddie is the only child who is actually shown getting killed by it besides George Denborough and Patrick Hochstetter. Quote, Adrian Mellon. Adrian Mellon is a young homosexual man in Derry. He grows fond of the town, despite its violently homophobic mindset, and only agrees to leave to please his partner, Don Haggerty, before leaving. However, the two attend a town fair in July 1984, and on the way home, they are harassed by 3 gay-hating youths. The 3 attack them, Adrian especially because of a hat he won at the fair, and throw him from a bridge over a canal. When he hits the bottom, Adrian is attacked by Pennywise as it briefly pressured his ribs until he shrieked and dragged him away to kill. Though Don and one of the bullies, Chris Unwin, witnessed this, no mention of Pennywise is made at the trial. Will Hanlon. Will Hanlon is the father of Mike Hanlon. While dying of cancer in 1962, he tells Mike about his experiences in the Army Air Corps in the 1920s and about establishing the Black Spot, a club started by Will and his Black Air Force buddies and originally meant exclusively for black members, but gradually began accepting members of other races as well. He recounts how, in the fall of 1930, the club was burned down by a group of Maine Legion of White Decency members, causing numerous deaths. He narrowly survived the fire due to the intervention of his friend Dick Halloran, a character who also appears in King's The Shining. He also tells Mike that he witnessed a giant bird, the same bird that nearly killed Mike in 1958, carry off a Legion of White Decency member and fly away with him in its talons. Quote, Norbert Keene, the owner and operator of the Center Street drugstore for 50 years. From 1925 to 1975. The losers dislike him, thinking of him as cruel and snide. He administers Eddie's asthma medication and later reveals to him, for unclear motives, that it is only a placebo ordered by his mother. Many years later, when Keene is 85 and retired, Mike interviews him, and Mr. Keene tells him the story of the Bradley Gang, a group of outlaws who were hiding out in Maine after several bank robberies in the Midwest. He tells Mike that, in 1929, a year before the fire at the Black Spot, the entire gang was murdered by Derry residents when stopping through town to buy ammunition. Mr. Keene says that, rather than covering up the event, the whole town instead pretended that it never occurred, including Police Chief Jim Sullivan, who even took part in the slayings. Finally, Mr. Keene mentions seeing a clown participating in the shooting, but that it was wearing farmer's attire rather than a traditional clown suit. He speculates that the clown was in fact a disguised member of the Derry citizenry or possibly a performer from a nearby carnival, but cannot explain reports out that the clown was seen at several different places at once and that it cast no shadow. Quote, Tom Rogan, the insane, abusive, violent and sadistic husband of Beverly Marsh. Tom has a very predatory view of women, and he thrives on the control he has over his vulnerable wife. When Beverly tries to leave for Derry, he refuses to let her, whipping her with a belt. Tom is surprised when the normally docile Beverly fights back and almost kills him. He follows Beverly to Derry with the intent of killing her, but is manipulated by it to kidnap Bill's wife, Audra. Instead, he later dies from shock after seeing its true form. Quote, Alvin Marsh, Beverly Marsh's abusive father. Although he is not an alcoholic or drug user, he abuses Bev and her mother and acts misogynistically, though there are times when Alvin is shown to be a loving and caring father to Bev. As an adult, Beverly falls out of contact with her father, and when she returns to Derry in 1985, she discovers he has died 5 years before. Quote, Kay McCall, Beverly Marsh's close friend, a divorcee and an affluent writer of feminist literature. Beverly turns to her when fleeing her husband Tom. She is brutally assaulted by Tom, who successfully extracts all she knows about his missing wife's whereabouts. Quote, Audra Phillips Denborough, Bill's wife, a famous film actress who bears a marked resemblance to Beverly. She follows Bill to Derry due to her concern over his mental state and is kidnapped by Tom Rogan, who is acting on its orders. She becomes catatonic after seeing its deadlights form, but Bill revives her by taking her on a ride on his childhood bike Silver. She is the only person who has survived after seeing its true form. Quote, Zach and Sharon Denborough, Bill and Georgie's father and mother. Initially loving and supportive parents, they become distant from their son and from each other in their grief over Georgie's death. And Bill's hope of regaining their love is one of his biggest motives in fighting it. Zach, an electrician for a hydroelectric firm, has knowledge of Derry's sewer system that becomes instrumental in helping Bill determine where it can be found. Both have died by the time the losers reunite in 1985. Quote, Sonia Kasbrak, Eddie's mother, a morbidly obese widow. She has convinced herself that Eddie is seriously ill with multiple illnesses including asthma, despite repeatedly assurances from doctors and teachers that he is basically healthy. She uses her son's health as a way of controlling him, refusing to let him participate in physical activities, which Eddie enjoys, and limiting his contact with friends. Eddie is terrified of upsetting her, but manages to stand up to her after she blames his friends for Henry Bowers breaking his arm. She dies in 1980, by which point she weighs over 400 pounds. Quote, Maturine the turtle. This ancient turtle is said to have vomited out our universe when he had a stomachache. He is kind, wise, loving, gentle, compassionate and benevolent, having a very grandfather-like demeanor when speaking to humans. In 1958, he communicates with Bill Denborough for a minute while he is under an illusion created by it. Bill pleads for help in defeating it and the turtle simply gives Bill advice that he must stand by his friends and perform the ritual of Chud. During the second ritual of Chud in 1985, it tells Bill that the turtle has since died by choking on a galaxy. But it is ambiguous as to whether or not this is true.